Hello, nitwits, and welcome to Knitting Time with Willie. I'm your host, Willie Muse, joined as always by my co-host, Knitkalis. And while I don't know when you're watching this video, for me personally, it's the new year. Well, actually, it's technically a couple of days before the new year because the holidays are tricky, and that's when I could fit filming into my schedule. But this video is New Year's themed, so I'm going to pretend that it's the new year. Although, truth told, I don't even know why I'm bothering with that, because by the time you guys see this, it will be at least February, which means that New Year's content will be very dated, so if anything, I should probably downplay the New Year's of it all. Not that it matters anyway, this video would do bad even if it was topical, because, well, the algorithm hates me. I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm telling you this. I guess wine just makes me sad and chatty. God. In any case, for me currently, it's approximately the new year, and the new year is all about making changes, and because of that, I feel like it's the perfect time for the next entry in my absolute least popular series, Improving My Life Through Content.
Improving my life through content.
Seriously though, I'm not joking when I say that this is my least popular series. When I say that the algorithm hates me, it's largely because of these videos. But whatever, we're all gonna die one day anyways. Why am I still drinking this? For those of you who have never watched one of these videos, and based on the stats that YouTube shows me that's most of you, in this series I make a change that I think will improve my life in some way. And then I force myself to stick to said change for 30 days by making content about the experience because, well, the prospect of self-improvement isn't much of a motivator for me, but the prospect of not having a video ready when I need one certainly is. When I was trying to come up with the change I'd be making this time around, my immediate thought was to do something called a dry January, which, for those of you who don't know, is this annual ritual that a lot of people take part in, where after a period of binge drinking that starts somewhere around Thanksgiving, they tell themselves that they're going to become teetotalers until the month of February. Granted, for most people it usually only lasts until somewhere around the 8th, but still, it's a noble goal nonetheless. And truth told, I probably could stand to do a dry January myself, given the holidays and my general unwillingness to accept reality. I've been imbibing a lot more alcohol than I probably should recently, so it makes sense that I'd give it up for a while. That said though, while taking a 30-day break from booze would probably be good for improving my life, I don't necessarily know if it would be good for improving my life through content.
Improving my life through content.
For these videos to work, the changes I make have to be big enough that they give me stuff to talk about. And while I'm for sure a lush, I don't believe myself to be such a lush that giving up drinking will affect my day-to-day life that dramatically because, well, even if I'm not doing a dry January, I still don't drink every day. For the most part. So I threw the dry January idea out the window and did my best to try and come up with other changes I can make in order to improve my life. And as I was racking my brain, I realized that there's something I drink way more than alcohol, and that's Diet Coke. I actually do drink that every day. Sometimes I do it multiple times a day, and from everything I've heard, it's not a good thing for me to be doing. Like based on the way people talk about it sometimes, it feels like I might as well just be injecting cancer directly into my veins. So I briefly considered doing a video about giving up Diet Coke for a month. Of course, then I thought about that for longer than 10 minutes, and I realized that video sounds boring as hell. Like, yeah, I drink Diet Coke every day, but I feel like it affects my life way less than even alcohol does. Like, at least alcohol makes me do stuff I regret. All Diet Coke does is silently build up in my system, slowly killing me. So, there's not much to discuss there. So I went back to the drawing board once again, and after a little bit more soul-searching, I realized that instead of focusing on the things I drink a lot of, but probably shouldn't, I should instead focus on something that I don't drink enough of and probably should. And that thing is, of course, water. Just about any list of healthy choices you should make in your life will include being properly hydrated somewhere towards the top, and I honestly don't know if that's something I've ever managed to do. Obviously I drink water, but I don't know if I've ever done it in such a way that I'm doing it right, if that makes sense. And so I've decided to change that. Rather than doing a dry January, I am going to be doing a wet January. For the next 30 or so days, the only liquid that will enter these lips will be water. No alcohol, no Diet Coke, maybe some NyQuil if I get sick along the way because I prefer the liquid to the capsules. But other than that, the only thing I'm going to be drinking is the daily recommended amount of water that Google tells me is necessary for my body to function. So I'm going to finish this one drink and then probably like 6 more after that, and then I'll meet you back here to check in with you guys on my first day of hydrated living. Cheers. Not gonna lie, it kind of grows on you. Alright, it's been about a day since my wet January started, and so far things are fine. I guess, I don't know, I feel like not a lot interesting has happened yet. Like, it's currently 4:04 on a Wednesday, so the fact that I haven't had any alcohol yet isn't really all that noteworthy. And honestly, even if I were the sort of person who was capable of midday, midweek alcohol consumption, I feel like I still wouldn't be drinking today because the holidays have just ended, and so I have had my fill of booze for the foreseeable future. Between Christmas and New Year's and a third holiday I made up called Winica, I feel like my body has almost forgotten what it feels like to not be hungover. So replacing the cocktails and nogs I'd normally be drinking in the evening with ice cold water actually feels pretty good. Which is not to say that it's all smooth sailing. I will admit that there have been a couple of times when I went for a Diet Coke out of habit only to have to stop myself once I remembered that I'm not drinking them this month and settle for a glass of water instead, which, not quite as tasty. Still, even though I definitely miss Diet Coke way more than I miss alcohol, I wouldn't really say that I miss it that much. Like, I'm not good at remembering to buy groceries, so there have been many days where I've gone without Diet Coke just by virtue of not having access to any, and that's annoying, but it's fine, and that's kind of what it feels like right now, I'm not in withdrawal or anything. I'll just occasionally think that I want a Diet Coke, and then I'll remind myself that I can't have one, and I'll go about my day. And that's not to say that things won't get harder going forward, because, well, they definitely will. I can already feel myself learning to hate the taste of water. If water has a taste. But whatever challenges I'm going to face in the future aren't really an issue yet, because my body has only just begun to adjust, so it just feels too soon for me to tell. Honestly, the worst change I've noticed has nothing to do with my body at all. When I was planning this video, I looked up how much water I'm supposed to drink in a given day, and I bought a bottle in that size because I figured that would be a convenient way to make sure I was getting the right amount of water every day. And unfortunately, now that means I have to lug this bulbous motherfucker with me everywhere I go. So, not as convenient as I was hoping for. And what makes this thing even worse is that, water's heavy. Carrying this thing around empty would be annoying enough, but carrying it around full is, genuinely kind of a workout. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if by the end of this month, I developed arm muscles because of it. But yeah, it's annoying, but not the worst. And other than that, the only change I've really noticed is that I'm a little bit more sleepy feeling than usual, and I don't even know if that has anything to do with the changes I've made. I'm mentioning it because I feel like since I'm not getting the caffeine I'd normally get from the Diet Coke, there's a chance it's related, but honestly, I don't think that Diet Coke is that caffeinated that going off it would cause me any noticeable fatigue, and more than anything, I think I might just be coming down with something. Maybe I'm wrong though, who knows? I'll check back with you guys in a few days and tell you how I'm feeling. I'm so tired. It's been about a week since I stopped drinking anything besides water, and as it turns out, the caffeine I got from drinking Diet Coke does have an effect on my body. As a matter of fact, I'd go so far as to say that it was the only thing that's been keeping me functioning for the past few months. I said last time that I thought I might be coming down with something, but as it turns out, that's just because the lack of caffeine in my bloodstream has left me feeling like I'm bracing for the worst cold of my life. This past week, I've felt drained. My thoughts have been a little bit cloudy, my eyelids have felt 10 times their normal weight, and the mere act of staying awake now feels like a chore. Not a bad chore, mind you, but a chore nonetheless. Staying awake right now is kind of along the same lines as taking out the trash, you know? I can do it without too much effort, but I really don't want to. I'd much rather stay on the couch. Of course, it does not help my fatigue that on the literal same day that I decided to cut caffeine out of my life, I received an email from an adoption agency telling me I was approved for a puppy and I could pick him up tomorrow. This little bastard is an asshole, and there have been a couple of nights this week where he decided at 4 a.m. that he doesn't like his crate anymore, and he has to tell us about it by screaming bloody murder. And you might think that the fact that I'm tired all day would mean that falling back asleep at 4 a.m. would be easy for me, but no, it is not. Isn't that right? All right, get out of here, you little douche. Asshole. And unfortunately, the effects caused by the caffeine deficit that's currently plaguing my bloodstream don't stop with the fatigue. My ability to do work has taken a hit in the past few days as well, so hooray! Granted, that probably does have a little bit to do with the fatigue, because being tired all the time certainly doesn't make it easier to write, but I also think that there's more to it than that. I talked in this video about how I recently switched ADHD medications from a stimulant to a non-stimulant. After a week off of Diet Coke, I'm realizing that just because they're not being prescribed to me, that doesn't mean that I'm not still on stimulants. The stimulant effect of my Diet Coke was so much weaker than the stimulant effect of my medication that I sort of thought that it meant that it wasn't doing anything at all, but that is not the case. In fact, I actually think that I've been subconsciously using caffeine to bridge the gap between my old meds and my new ones, and because of that, now that the caffeine is gone, a lot of my ADHD symptoms are much more pronounced than they had been. Which sucks, because they were already pretty pronounced to begin with. And I guess that this is all just a long way of saying that so far, my month of being hydrated sucks ass. Hopefully things will get better. Probably not. I'll check back in with you guys in a couple of days to let you know how things are going. It's day 10, and today I'm going to be discussing a topic that's become a major part of my life recently, and that, of course, is piss. At this point in my little experiment, I would say that the hardest part about drinking nothing but water hasn't been missing the taste of Diet Coke or constantly feeling like I'm about to pass out from a lack of caffeine in my veins. No, for me, the hardest part has been just the sheer amount of urine that I've had to expel from my body on an hourly basis. And I don't get it either, because it's not like I'm drinking more liquids than I normally do. It's just that it all happens to be water now, and so that apparently changes the physics of how it moves through my body in a way that I still don't fully understand. The fact that Diet Coke is apparently able to take a leisurely stroll through my urinary tract while water dashes through it with the force of Usain Bolt is deeply confusing to me, and what's worse is that it's genuinely starting to take a toll on my daily schedule. I feel like 40% of my life now is spent urinating, while the other 60% is spent feeling like I have to urinate and wondering how long I can wait before I have to get up and do it. And unfortunately for me, the answer is usually not that long. Apparently, well-hydrated urine has absolutely no chill, and because of that, I feel like I've come close to pissing my pants no fewer than 16 times in the past 10 days, which, not to brag, but that's a lot higher than my normal number. The worst instance of this happened at the grocery store when I popped in real quick to grab myself dinner. I stepped through the automatic doors feeling totally fine, but then 10 minutes later, I was in the freezer aisle feeling like my pants were about to burst. By the time I was being rung up, I was literally doing that silly dance that toddlers do when they have to go really bad. And though I'm happy to say that I did ultimately make it to a restroom on time, the concerned look on the cashier's face felt almost as uncomfortable as a pair of wet jeans. And the near constant threat of soiling myself hasn't been the only way that my increased water intake has been affecting my life recently. I know I gave my puppy a lot of shit for waking me up in the middle of the night, but if we're being honest, my bladder has been way worse in that regard. And it genuinely sucks too, because when I set out to make a video where I drank a bunch of water, I fully expected that I'd be spending day 10 talking about how much healthier I feel and how clear my skin is. What I didn't expect to be talking about was how I'm fighting with every ounce of strength that I have to avoid wetting the bed. I don't know, maybe next time I'll get to talk about how clear my skin is. Or maybe I will have finally wet the bed by then. But whatever happens, I will talk to you then. It's been a while since my last check-in, and that's partly because I've been busy, but if we're being honest, it's mostly because there's not a lot that I can say when all I'm doing is drinking a bunch of water. I should really start thinking these video ideas through a little bit longer before I go devoting a month of my life to them. Whatever, I'm an idiot. That said though, enough time has passed at this point that me not having any alcohol is actually something noteworthy now, so I figured I'd use this check-in to discuss that. And as far as not drinking this month is concerned, it's been fine. Also not really as interesting as I was expecting when I started making this video, but whatever, I rally on. The truth is that most of the time I don't really miss alcohol as much as I thought I would. Save for the occasional casual glass/bottle of wine after a hard day, I don't really drink outside of social situations, and so not drinking hasn't been all that hard this month because I haven't been going to a lot of social situations because, well, why would I? I can't drink. And I know that sounds really bad to say, but the truth is that I do have pretty bad social anxiety, and while I do enjoy getting out of the house and meeting new people, the emotional toll it takes on me can be a lot to deal with. Most of the conversations I have are spent inside my own head, questioning every word that comes out of my mouth, trying my best to portray myself in a certain way, and taking note of all the ways I feel like I fucked up so I can beat myself up for it later. On the rare occasion that I'm able to get out of my own head, it's so I can do my best to try and get into the head of whoever I'm talking to. I speculate on what they're thinking of me, if the words coming out of my mouth are words that they like, and if the way I'm trying to portray myself is working, and then I take notes of all the ways that my perception of their perception of me is falling short so that I can, again, beat myself up for it later. As you can imagine, this all gets rather exhausting after a certain point, and so rather than put myself through that whole ordeal, 9 times out of 10 I just opt to stay home and talk to the same 3 people I always talk to who don't stress me out because I know that there's nothing I can say to make their opinion of me sink any lower than it already is. And judge all you want, but the workaround that I usually use for that other 1 time out of 10 has traditionally been alcohol, which, I get it, it's not great. I feel very confident that there are many casual acquaintances on the periphery of my life who think that I'm an alcoholic, and that's because I have usually been drinking when I talk to them, because I, through no fault of their own, am not emotionally capable of speaking to them while sober. Still, for as terrible as it might be to call alcohol my coping mechanism in any situation, it does work. I know that you have all heard the term take the edge off at some point, and that's probably because that's a genuinely great way to describe what booze can do for people. Get a couple of drinks in me, and whatever daggers of judgment and self-doubt I have pointed at my own psyche become just dull enough that the wounds they leave behind aren't so deep that I can't play through the pain and have an actual conversation. Which is not to say that there's no anxiety anymore, and that whole beating myself up thing that I talked about still happens once the blood in my veins dries up, but it works just enough that I'm able to socialize, and despite everything I've just said, I do genuinely enjoy socializing when I can. And this is all just my long way of saying that not drinking this month hasn't been as difficult as I was expecting because I just stayed home and didn't tempt myself by putting myself in situations where I'd want to drink. Except for one time. About a week ago, it was my brother's girlfriend's birthday, and to celebrate, they rented out a room for karaoke, which, even if I could drink, everything about that sentence I just said sounds like my absolute nightmare. Still, I love my brother's girlfriend, and sorry I can't get drunk so I'm staying home felt like a pretty weak excuse, so I went, and it was the first time in a very long time that I had been in a party-type setting like that while I was stone cold sober. And being clear-headed in a social situation was actually really interesting because it allowed me to accurately assess my conversational abilities for the first time in a long time. And in doing so, I was surprised to learn that, if anything, I'm way worse at human interaction than I thought. I always kind of felt like I was bad at it in a way that people read as pitiable, but if anything, I come off as mean. Which is not something I was expecting. The setup of the room we were in meant that a lot of people were all congregated in one big group, and being in big groups like that is not something that I like to do, so I'd end up standing conspicuously off to the side in a way that I think made it seem like I was actively avoiding people, which... Well, I guess I was, but not because I didn't like them, it was just because that crowded setting made me very uncomfortable. And on the rare occasion that night that I did have a conversation, well, let's just say that I did not do well. I feel like people can sense the judgment in my head, but they have no way of realizing that it's all directed inward. So then I end up feeling like I'm coming off like an asshole, and that just makes me judge myself even harder, and the whole cycle just keeps right on spinning. And unfortunately, not being drunk isn't the only way that not drinking has affected my ability to exist in a party. Whenever I'm in a conversation, I inevitably get to the point where I need to flee for my own mental well-being, and I didn't realize this until now, but apparently my way of doing that was to tell people that I needed to grab a drink, and so not having that little trick in my back pocket anymore made things that much harder for me that night. The best I could do this time around was to say that I had to use the restroom, but for some reason it was the first time all month where I didn't have to pee constantly, and so every time I got overwhelmed by a conversation, I'd just end up sadly standing over the toilet with my genitals flopped out over the waist of my pants doing nothing for an amount of time that seemed like it would constitute a believable bathroom break. Still, my newfound sobriety wasn't all bad, though making it through the party was a lot harder for me without alcohol. Once I actually made it through, the aftermath was actually pretty okay. Like I said, I spend a lot of time beating myself up for the stuff that I do and say in social situations like that, but this time around I didn't really do that. Well, maybe a little, but definitely less than I normally do. And I'm sure there's a lot of reasons for that. I was in a room full of nice people that I mostly know. I was only there for about an hour and a half, and not being drunk, I did and said a lot less stuff that I regret than I normally would. Still, had the night played out in the exact same way, only I had been drinking, I feel like I would have woken up with a much bigger pang of regret stabbing me in the side of my gut the next morning than I did. And it kind of makes me think that a lot of my Catholic curses are caused as much by residual alcohol interacting with the chemicals in my body as they are by my own self-loathing. If not more. I don't know, maybe that's just wishful thinking, but it's definitely something to consider when I do start drinking again. If I do start drinking again. When I do start drinking again. Okay, it's day something. I don't know, time's not real. All I know is that I can have gin again soon. And since my little experiment is coming to a close, I think now would be a good time to come clean and let you guys know that I've been cheating this whole time. Kinda. Actually, I don't know, it honestly feels like a real gray area. After like 8 days without caffeine, I realized that I simply wasn't going to make it the other 22 if I couldn't find a way to get myself a little pick-me-up because, well, as it turns out, I am not a naturally energetic person. Who would have guessed? At first, I was honestly just going to abandon this video altogether, but unfortunately, I'd already recorded a lot of footage at that point that I would have needed to scrap in order to do so, and since I refused to live in a world where I did any amount of unnecessary work, I instead decided that I would need to figure out a loophole in order to continue on with my wet January. So I did a little research trying to figure out the driest possible way to caffeinate my body, and eventually I settled on chocolate-covered espresso beans. I ordered a bag and started measuring out 12 of them a day, which Google told me would be equivalent to about 2 cups of coffee, and it was honestly great. It gave me not only the boost I needed to make it through the day, but also a legitimate excuse to justify eating candy in the morning. And yeah, everything felt great, and I went about my life chomping on espresso beans and filling my gullet to the brim with water, feeling proud that I was able to adhere to the healthy goals I had set for myself. And then I thought about things for literally 2 seconds and realized, what the fuck am I even doing? After all, my whole goal with drinking more water was ostensibly so I could practice making healthier choices, but this was definitely not the healthier choice. The moment I bought a gigantic bag of candy, I should have probably just let the rational part of my brain take over and tell myself, just have a damn cup of coffee. Especially because I basically was just having a damn cup of coffee. I was mixing coffee beans and water and putting it into my body. The mixing may have happened in my belly and not a French press, but the same shit ended up flowing through my veins either way. So in the grand scheme of things, I feel like the only distinction there was in my head. If my little loophole didn't break the rules I had set out for myself, it's only because the rules I set out for myself didn't really make sense in a lot of ways, because, well, the coffee beans weren't the only gray area I found myself in this month. When you actually stop to think about it, the differences between drinking and eating are nebulous at best. I mean, not all food is solid, so is that cheating? There have been 2 times this month where I was given a side of miso soup with a dinner that I ordered, and I just had to let it go to waste because I wasn't sure if eating soup counted as drinking something other than water, and that honestly sucked because, well, miso soup is delicious. That said, though, I have eaten stew this month, but I don't know why that was any better. Just because it's a little bit thicker, it still follows the same basic mechanics as soup, so I don't know why there was a distinction to me there. Although that said, how good is stew? If you haven't had stew recently, I recommend busting out the slow cooker and treating yourself. It's really tasty. And some of you might be saying that stew is fine and soup is fine because you're eating them, not drinking them. But if that's the case, then could I have also eaten Diet Coke? It probably wouldn't have been as satisfying as it is when it comes out of a can, but I promise you there were days towards the beginning of the month where I absolutely would have resorted to pouring a can into a bowl and eating it with a spoon. I'm not above that. The more I think about what exactly I'm doing, the more I feel like I have no idea what exactly I'm doing, and it makes me wonder why the fuck I'm even doing it. And I'm almost done, so maybe it doesn't matter, but part of me wishes I would have figured out the answers to these questions before I went and let them dictate an entire month of my life. Whatever, I'm an idiot. Alright, here we are. It's the final day of my wet January. Although, if we're being honest, it is technically February. I didn't get around to doing check-ins last week because I got distracted writing about MILF Manor, so I had to extend the whole water drinking thing a little bit longer. I'm not very good at time management. Whatever, that's a topic for another video. Over the past 5 weeks, I have drank at least 64 ounces of water a day and absolutely nothing else. I am officially at a place where nobody can tell me that I am not properly hydrated, and according to everything that I've read, right now my body should be running like a car that's just gotten an oil change and a fresh tank of gas. And now that I'm at the healthiest place I've been, possibly ever, all that I can say is, Which, don't get me wrong, I don't want to get on camera and tell literally tens of people that being properly hydrated isn't good, because obviously it is, and everyone should of course be drinking water. That said though, when I think about how much I put into this thing over the past month, what I ended up getting out of it, honestly just doesn't feel worth it. The way people talk about being hydrated, they make it sound like it's some superpower that solves literally every last one of your problems and makes you feel like a magical being sent down from the heavens to dwell among mortals. But after more than a month of what felt like some pretty drastic changes to my life, all I really ended up feeling like is myself. Gun to my head, I could not tell you one positive thing that I got out of drinking water all month. Maybe it helped me lose a little bit of weight that I've been having trouble getting rid of, but I've also been eating better and exercising since the holidays ended, and I feel like that probably played a much bigger role in that than the water did. And a lot of the stuff that I was hoping for just straight up didn't happen. My skin's the same, my mood's the same, my inability to wake up in the morning remains unchanged. Even some of the most basic stuff I was hoping for turned out to be just like a straight up bust. I get really bad heartburn, and I had always kind of assumed that it was being exacerbated by the multiple cans of acid juice I was drinking every day, but that's still here. If anything, it's a little bit worse now, because at least before, I could blame it on the Diet Coke and make it feel like a choice I was making, but now when I get a burning feeling in the chest area, I have to reconcile with the fact that my body just naturally doesn't function very well. And it's all honestly really disappointing. I think out of all of the changes I've made for one of these videos, this is the one that I had the highest hopes for, and I don't think that I got anywhere near as much out of it as I wanted to. But then again, maybe I did. Normally by the end of the month, I am champing at the bit to get back to whatever bad habit I gave up, but this time around I don't really feel that way. Like I said, I've already extended it an extra week, and I feel like I could have easily taken that way further if I wanted to. I haven't had a craving for a Diet Coke in quite some time, and while I will definitely drink alcohol again in the immediate future, that's only because I have a couple of birthdays coming up, and I'd like to be able to talk to people. And believe me, if there were an eating espresso beans equivalent of drinking booze, I'd probably stick to that. And even when I do start drinking alcohol again, I don't think I'll be doing it in lieu of water anytime soon. I'm probably not going to keep lugging my giant jug around with me wherever I go, but I do think I'll probably keep filling it up every morning when I wake up and making sure I've drank it all by the time I go to bed. I don't feel like that much has changed, but I'm still hesitant to change back to the way things were, and I'm not entirely sure why that is. So now I'm going to go back to the way things were for a week and collect my thoughts, and then I'll meet you back here for one final check-in. Since last we spoke, I've broken my wet January many times over, and as with a lot of things I've talked about in this video, it was fine. I drank alcohol for the first time in a while at my friend's birthday party, and that was a lot of fun because, well, not gonna lie, I did get pretty damn buzzed. Which, for the record, is not to say that I drank a lot. One unexpected side effect of going off of alcohol is that now that I'm back on it, my tolerance is way down. I got way loopier off of the few drinks I had the other night than I normally would have, and I'm honestly kind of happy about that. One thing that I already plan on taking from this little experiment is that I'm going to make an active effort to drink less going forward, but I'm not doing it because that's a mature, healthy lesson to learn. I just like being a cheap date. If I can keep my tolerance low, that means I'll be spending less money on buying alcohol and less calories on drinking it, and both of those things sound very appealing to me. I've also had a few diet sodas in the past few days, and those were also fine. A little sweeter than I remember, but tasty nonetheless. I haven't really started craving Diet Coke again yet, and like the alcohol, I'm going to do my best to keep myself from backsliding in that regard, although, again, it's not because I've learned some deep, profound lesson this past month. It's just that if I don't crave it, then there's no need to buy it, and that's one less item on the grocery list that I have to remember. And yeah, like I said, it's all been fine. Honestly, if I weren't doing this for a video, I feel like I could have easily finished up the month and gone back to life as normal, feeling like absolutely nothing of note happened, because on the surface, it does kind of feel like nothing of note actually happened. But besides me almost peeing my pants in the grocery store that one time, that was fairly noteworthy. That said though, since I am doing this for a video, I've been actively trying to figure out what the fuck I'm going to say in order to close this thing out, and that means that I've been paying a lot more attention to how I feel than I normally would, and because of that, I've noticed that since I've gone off my water diet, I have felt worse. Not a lot worse, mind you, not even noticeably worse, but if I really think about it and focus on myself, I can notice a shift towards the negative direction. I've been a little more anxious than I had been, especially on the morning after I drank. I've also been slightly cloudier, a little bit more tired, and I've noticed that I haven't been peeing as much, which, well, I know I complained about it before, but now that it's gone, I miss it. It gave me something to do, you know? And saying all that out loud all at once, I feel like it actually does sound like a lot's changed since I started to allow non-aquatic liquids back into my body. But I'm being 100% serious when I say that had I not been trying very hard to pay attention to how I was feeling, I don't think I would have noticed anything. Because ultimately, in the past few days, the only thing that I've really felt like is myself. And that's kind of a problem I have with a lot of these month-long experiments I do. They require me to be aware of how I'm feeling, but that's kind of hard sometimes because I always kind of just feel like myself because, well, I am always myself. I think. I don't know. It's hard to tell sometimes. That little breakdown I had a few check-ins back about what counts as eating and what counts as drinking sent me down a weird little rabbit hole because, well, once you start pulling at that thread, a whole bunch of stuff starts to unravel. Like, what the fuck is anything when you really stop to think about it? We have all these words that mean all these things, and on the surface it all feels so simple, but if you actually stop to think about almost anything, you realize that the clear-cut lines we ascribe to the world around us aren't nearly as clear-cut as they seem. And there is perhaps nothing less clear-cut to me right now than whatever the fuck I'm talking about when I talk about myself. Don't get me wrong, I do have a vague idea of what it is, but when I actually stop to pay close attention to it and try to pinpoint what exactly my self is, I do start to have questions. If something bad happens and it makes me angrier than I usually am I myself? If I learn something new, does that new thing become a part of myself? And then when I inevitably forget it, do I stop being myself because it's not there anymore? And what about all the stuff I put into my body? Like, hypothetically, say I can't think of a way to start a video, so I decide to mix red wine and Diet Coke together and drink it on camera. Am I then part red wine and Diet Coke? It sounds silly to say, but yeah, I kinda am, I guess. And we're constantly drinking and eating and learning and observing and remembering and forgetting, and all of that stuff changes our self in ways that are impossible for us to even realize. One thing I thought about a lot while making this video was something that happened when I was in college. One morning, I got a call from my best friend there, basically asking me if I could come over and be with him. He had just broken up with his girlfriend, and according to him, he was feeling extremely depressed. And hearing how beaten up his voice sounded on the phone was really, really weird. It was really, really weird. Don't get me wrong, it's obviously very normal to be depressed after a breakup, but in this specific instance, it did feel strange to me because from everything I could gather, he had been wanting to end the relationship for a while now. I didn't even get the sense that he liked her all that much, if we're being honest, but now that it was over, he was taking it really hard. When I went over to his dorm room, he started describing all the ways he felt like shit. My head is cloudy, he said. I can't sleep, I can't eat. I can barely get out of bed in the morning. I sat there listening as he rattled off a bullet-pointed list of depression symptoms fit for WebMD, doing my best to be there for him, even though, again, it was all very confusing to me. Everything I had heard about this relationship in the months leading up to this was about how miserable he was in it and how he wanted out. So the fact that he was taking this breakup this hard was bizarre, especially because I had seen him go through breakups before and they barely even fazed him. If we're being honest, he was usually in a new relationship by the end of the month. Still, he was clearly going through something, so we put on a movie and I sat with him while he wailed about how bad he felt and how much he missed her with a sort of overdramatic verve that only a college student is still able to muster. Eventually, the movie ended and my ability to care started to wane, so I told him I was headed home and got up to leave. As I did, my friend pointed to a big plastic bottle full of vitamin gummies and said, "Before you go, could you hand me some of those?" I said sure, and when I asked him how many he wanted, he said, "I don't know, like a handful, I guess." In response to that, I told him that vitamin gummies were not like candy, and he can't just snack on them, and despite the fact that he was in his 20s at this point, he seemed to be surprised by that. I gave him the 2 gummies that the back of the bottle recommended and left, and when I checked in on him the next day, he told me that he was feeling great. The fog in his brain had lifted, his mood had improved, and he had apparently woken up early that morning to play tennis. As it turns out, his depression had less to do with the fact that he was upset about losing his girlfriend and more to do with the fact that he had apparently been getting 800% of his daily recommended value of riboflavin each day. I think what must have happened is that after the breakup, he did what a lot of people do and turned to snacking, but because we were college students, the only thing he had to snack on was vitamin gummies. He started feeling bad around his breakup, so it stood to reason that his breakup was the reason he started feeling bad, but in reality, he was just fucking around with his body chemistry in a way that I still make fun of him for to this very day. Had I not told him to stop eating those gummies, there's a good chance that my friend would have just kept snacking on them and feeling way too bad about the end of his relationship until the bottle ran out. And that's honestly so strange to think about because, that doesn't feel like how it's supposed to work. Your feelings are supposed to be your feelings. That feels foundational to establishing what your self is. But as it turns out, your feelings are your thoughts, are your brain chemistry, are your body chemistry, are your generic multivitamins from CVS. Your self is complicated. I feel like it's a combination of so many goddamn things, but not a combination like when you put things into a blender, because that feels too simple, honestly. I think it's more a combination like how the Planeteers would join forces to make Captain Planet, just a bunch of things that come together to bring forth this entirely new entity that's completely unrecognizable from the parts that made it up, but still very much influenced by them. The idea of the self feels like it should be simple because I think on some level we need it to be simple. It's such an important aspect of all of our lives that we need to have a way to talk about it that ignores the fact that it's an incredibly tangled system of things that I don't actually think is ever fully knowable. And I think because we simplify it so much sometimes, when you actually try to go and make sense of it, it can be a little bit overwhelming because it's honestly a lot. And really, if there's one thing I think I got out of my wet January, it's that I feel like I got closer to being able to do that than I have in a very long time. It simplified things just a little bit. In a lot of ways, water is a non-entity. It has no calories, a pH of 0. Granted, there's a good chance that there was a fair bit of lead in the stuff that I've been drinking based solely on the state of the building that I live in, but other than that, it feels pure. Maybe it doesn't lift me up in the way that I thought it might, but it certainly doesn't bring me down either. It's just kind of there, doing the things that it needs to do to make my body function, and then it leaves just as fast as it came. If not faster, it really does go through me. Of all the things I could possibly put into my body, be it food, thought, or feeling, water was without question the simplest, and by limiting myself to something so simple, it made the incomprehensible mess I call myself that much simpler. I complained earlier that after a month of drinking nothing but water, the only thing that I felt like was myself, but the more I think about it, the more I think that that's maybe not such a bad thing, because when you get right down to it, really and truly feeling like yourself can be hard sometimes. By drinking water, I learned that maybe some of the things I thought were emotions are chemicals, and maybe some of the chemicals I thought I needed I don't really, and some of the ones I didn't think were doing that much are actually fundamental to my ability to exist as a human. I'm truly never going off of caffeine again. I maybe didn't gain the clear skin and superpowers I was hoping for, but I do feel like I got a better sense of my baseline self, and I genuinely think that that will help me make choices going forward that will help me move from the baseline towards a better direction. And that honestly ain't nothing. They say new year, new me, but the more I think about it, the more I feel like it doesn't actually take that long for a new you to form. From new things we learn and things we forget to the chemicals we consume and subsequently flush out of our pee holes, who we are is constantly changing. And if there's one thing I learned from my wet January, it's that it's important to try and be aware of what's going in and what's going out, because that's probably the best way to steer the you are now in the direction of the new you want to be. So cheers, everybody. Happy New Year, and here's hoping that whatever you are now, it's a little better than it was before. That's a lot better than red wine and Diet Coke. But yeah, that's my video. Please like and subscribe and share and comment and tell me if you liked it. And Also, tell me if you didn't. I want to know if it sucked, because I do want to try and make my videos better. And if you did like it, and you have a couple of bucks to spare, then please consider donating to my Patreon. It's a new year, and I'm trying to make more money in it than I did last year. So that helps. But yeah, other than that, I don't have much to say. Bye. Hello, Truth fans, and welcome to everyone in the know's favorite part of my videos, me posing for a thumbnail while my patrons' names scroll up the screen. And for this one, this video is not going to do well. So I feel like I'm just going to go cards on the table and ask. I'm going to put like a word bubble in the thumbnail, asking people to click on it. So like that, please. I'm gonna need to pull out all the stops, because like, who the fuck is gonna click on a video about me drinking water? That sounds awful. So like, I mean, thank you to those of you who did, but you are few and far between. Please. I also kind of, this might sound bad, but one thing I might try to do is, I've heard that like piercing eyes will get people to click on, so I might like digitally alter my eyes so that they're like bright blue and water-like, because I feel, so I like should be like, please, please. I was going to say, please click. And I think here it's going to say, like, I promise it's more interesting than it sounds. Because I hope that it was. Please. Please. As I'm doing this out loud, it does feel desperate. So maybe I'll have a couple where I'm drinking water instead. But then if I'm drinking water, then I don't have the option for the word bubble, because it's like, that would be like a ventriloquism act. People tell me that they watch this part. I don't know how. But maybe if I beg with the water, please. And just imagine just like piercing husky eyes. Please. That was a joke for me, because I always make that pose when I'm doing this section of the videos. I don't know, I feel like that was enough time for my patrons' names to scroll. Thank you, patrons. I really do appreciate you. Willie out.